Hey guys, tonight we time travel to the sun-drenched, incense-swirled world of ancient Egypt, a land of golden temples humming chants and priests so clean they shaved 3 times a day. You heard that right? Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Daily. All in the name of sacred hygiene ritual purity, and probably the fear of being judged by a crocodile-headed god for having stubble. Picture this, the dawn mist rising from the Nile, like breath on glass reeds rustling softly at the water's edge. The sandstone walls of the temple are already warm, drinking in the pale morning sun. You roll from your woven mat, stretch your limbs, and blink into a morning that smells of lotus blossom and last night's offerings. Your joints crack just enough to remind you that even in divine service, your mortal body is still very much on a 5,000-year-old mattress. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling social, drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see where everyone's drifting off from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge toward the basin, outside the priest's quarters, rubbing sleep from your eyes. The marble rim is cold beneath your fingertips, but the water inside is already room temperature, scooped from an amphora, carried up from the Nile before sunrise by a junior acolyte who clearly drew the short straw this week. You murmur a short invocation to Ma'at, goddess of cosmic order, and reach for your bronze razor. It's thin, delicate, and sharp enough to make you seriously reconsider your hand steadiness this early. You dip it into the water, swirl it gently, and begin your first shave of the day. Your arms, your chest, your head, your jaw. You even consider the tops of your feet just to be thorough. Nothing can remain, not a single stubborn hair. Not if you're going to be worthy of stepping inside the temple today. The breeze is still cool, tugging at your linen tunic dyed the softest shade of faded indigo, a color once reserved for royalty, but increasingly used by temple staff too. It flutters just enough to remind you how exposed your freshly shaved skin feels. Like a peeled grape. A really pious, slightly chilly grape. This ritual isn't just personal grooming, it's cosmic alignment. You're not cleaning yourself. You're cleaning your connection to the gods. You are a vessel of purity, which sounds grand until you remember your basin is shared with 2 other guys and someone left a nose hair in it again. Still, you finish your shave, careful not to nick your earlobe again like yesterday, and dry off with a linen cloth pressed with crushed lavender. The temple cat Tefin watches you from the nearby step with narrowed eyes, judging your technique. She blinks, slowly turns her back, and saunters off, tail held high like she's got divine appointments to keep. You head toward the inner sanctum, now bare feet, tapping softly on smooth stone. The corridors echo with the low thrum of morning chants. The air thickens with frankincense burned to purify the space and possibly to cover the smell of so many people living in close quarters with nothing but baskets of natron and a dream. At the gate, a high-ranking priest nods at you. His eyebrows are also missing standard procedure for the fully dedicated. You nod back discreetly, brushing a phantom itch from your smooth scalp. Inside, everything smells faintly of myrrh and dust and reverence. This is where the gods live, or at least where their statues do. You step lightly, not just out of respect, but because one wrong step means scrubbing the floor tiles with reeds for 3 days straight. Your first task polishing the shrine doors. You kneel before a set of tall carved panels inlaid with lapis lazuli and gold and begin to rub the wood with oil and cloth. It's methodical, hypnotic. You focus on the swirl of your motion, the soft squeak of cloth on wood. The world narrows to a pinpoint of polish and prayer. Mainstream historians agree that the Egyptian priesthood practiced extreme levels of cleanliness. Daily bathing, head shaving, and linen changes weren't just encouraged, they were required. Temple life was designed to be as sterile as possible, both physically and spiritually. It's like being a monk, but with more eyeliner and crocodile deities watching your every move. And fringe tidbit. Some priestly sects took it even further, refusing certain foods, like beans or garlic, avoiding contact with the common folk for weeks, and using blunt tools to brush their teeth so they wouldn't accidentally cause bleeding and become unclean. Imagine losing your temple privileges over a surprise canker sore. Truly tragic. Historians still argue whether the 3 times a day shaving ritual was actually enforced for every priest or just the high-ranking elite. Some evidence suggests that junior priests may have fudged it a little, one hurried shave at dawn and a quick splash of perfume later if the gods weren't looking. Others believe the practice was less about hair itself and more about the symbolism of constant self-renewal. But you're not taking any chances. You finish your first duties of the day and take a moment to breathe beneath the open ceiling of the inner courtyard. The sun has fully risen now, gilding the columns with gold light and warming the smooth stone beneath your feet. You stretch again mentally, preparing for round 2 of this deeply committed follicular warfare. Because noon will come fast, and with it, another basin, another blade, another offering of yourself in the name of eternal hygiene. By the time midday arrives, the temple is humming. Not the rushed chaos of a marketplace or the clang of a military encampment, but the soft, disciplined buzz of sacred routine. You feel it in the rhythm of the chants echoing from the sanctuary, in the scent of roasted barley rising from the kitchen hearth, and yes, in the distant splash of water hitting stone that signals it's time for your second shave of the day. You exhale slowly, rolling your shoulders, trying to muster enthusiasm for the task. Your skin is still a little pink from the morning session, but there's no escape. Skipping a shave isn't just frowned upon, it's the spiritual equivalent of walking into church wearing socks and a chicken mask. You grab your razor again, still warm from sitting in the sun, and step over to your favorite basin tucked near a potted papyrus plant that smells faintly of mud and memory. This time, your fingers move faster. You're no longer performing a sunrise ritual, you're just trying to stay ahead of temple inspection. The sun beams directly overhead, now casting sharp-edged shadows that make every stray whisker look like a moral failing. You swipe at your jaw check for rogue arm hairs and mutter a brief prayer to Thoth, god of wisdom and presumably good grooming habits. Halfway through, a young acolyte splashes past you, nearly sloshing your shaving bowl. He's carrying a jar of sacred honey, probably for the midday offering. You don't say anything, but the side eye you deliver is potent enough to be its own minor curse. Shaving in peace is a luxury, apparently. Once smooth again or close enough, you pat your cheeks with rose water and dab on a bit of crushed mint oil for freshness. The temple cat Tafin appears again, curling around your ankles like you owe her rent. She sniffs your leg and promptly sneezes. You consider it a compliment. Now it's time to head to the storeroom. Today's your turn to prep the incense for the inner chamber. You push open the thick wooden door and step into the cool dimness where clay jars line the shelves like well-behaved soldiers. Some are marked clearly frankincense, myrrh, juniper, resin. Others are more cryptic Desert Wind King's Delight, and one ominously labeled, "Do not open." You carefully spoon out pinches of ground resin into a shallow copper dish, stirring gently so it doesn't clump. The scent rises in a slow spiral, rich and musky. It's oddly comforting, like being wrapped in a hug by a ghost who really loves artisanal soap. Once the incense is prepared, you head out to the courtyard again, where several other priests are laying out food offerings, dates, flatbread, bits of roasted duck arranged on reed mats. You assist setting down a small dish of pickled fish and a honey cake shaped like a lotus. Someone gives you a wink and you realize they've snuck an extra cake into your robe pocket. Divine bribery or just a friend who knows you skipped breakfast. Either way, you're grateful. The offerings are arranged with geometric precision. Everything has meaning, the number of items, the direction they face, even the way the bread is stacked. You've been trained to see the symbols in everything. A duck is never just a duck. It's a metaphor for sustenance for the soul's journey and occasionally for really unfortunate temple dreams. One guy once claimed he dreamed of being pecked by a divine goose for eating leftover offerings. You never looked at poultry the same way again. The midday heat is thick now, pressing down like a wool blanket soaked in sunlight. Sweat gathers at your temples, and you fan yourself with a scrap of papyrus. Across the courtyard, a senior priest adjusts his linen kilt, which is dyed in a rare saffron tone, only allowed for those with over 20 years in service. You eye the color wistfully. Your own tunic is still regulation white-stained, faintly at the hem, with today's mint oil and yesterday's soap flakes. Mainstream records show that Egyptian priests not only shaved obsessively, but also followed strict rules about clothing, food, and bodily behavior. Linen had to be freshly laundered. Shoes were forbidden in sacred areas. And physical contact, even a brush of the shoulder, was to be avoided before ritual duties. You've perfected the art of sideways shimmying past people without touching them like some kind of spiritual crab. Fringe tidbit. Some priests were reportedly so fastidious that they even filtered their water through cloth to avoid accidentally swallowing insects, since doing so could render them impure. Imagine explaining that to your fellow priests mid-shave. Sorry I missed Vespers, I drank a bug and had to do a full reset. Historians still argue whether the triple shaving practice was universal or more symbolic. Some claim it was more about appearing ever renewed, a constant state of rebirth. Others think it was driven by Egypt's hot, humid climate and the need to avoid lice and skin infections in close quarters. There's also a theory that it doubled as a performance, a visible sign of devotion that reinforced the temple's sacred authority. As you head back toward the inner hall, you catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished copper plate left leaning against the wall. Your scalp gleams like a polished egg. Your cheeks are smooth. And despite the sore wrist and the stubborn patch you missed behind your ear, you feel oddly proud. You look like someone who could hold the attention of the gods, or at least intimidate a really impressionable goose. The rest of the temple moves like clockwork around you. Bells ring, feet pad softly across stone. Incense smoke curls in lazy loops near the ceiling. You're tired, sure, But there's something meditative about the monotony. Shave, serve, pray, repeat. You tuck the extra honey cake deeper into your robe. You're saving that for later, possibly for a moonlit snack, possibly as a bribe for someone else's turn at the evening shave. Either way, you've earned it. After all, spiritual cleanliness may be next to godliness. But that doesn't mean you can't also enjoy a little sugar on the side. The shadows shift as the afternoon deepens. You can feel the heat beginning to mellow, though the stone beneath your feet still radiates warmth like a sun-baked oven tile. The temple quiets slightly, not because anything has ended, but because this is the part of the day where everything pauses just a little. Even the gods you think must need a tea break. You're sent to tend to the sacred statues next. It's not the kind of chore you rush through. These figures carved from basalt granite or painted wood aren't just decorations. They're living vessels, sacred, watched, and occasionally, in your opinion, just a little bit smug-looking. The main chamber is cool and dim. A shaft of sunlight streams through a high slit in the wall, catching on the gold leaf details of the god's face and turning it into a radiant spotlight. You approach barefoot, stepping carefully on the smooth flagstones, a tray of tiny ritual tools balanced in your hands. There's a delicate feather brush for dusting a flask of perfumed oil, a strip of fresh linen for wiping the statue clean, and of course, a razor. Because yes, if you're keeping track, this is shave number 3. But don't worry. It's not your own this time. Statues of gods, you've learned, require maintenance almost as intense as your own. The deity's face must be clean, the ceremonial beard brushed and oiled, or in some temples, ritually shaved by pretending to trim it with a golden blade, and the whole form anointed with scented unguents. It's symbolic, of course, but everything here is. Every motion a message, every polish a prayer. You kneel, begin your careful ritual. Your movements are slow, practiced. The feather brush whispers across the shoulders of the statue, lifting tiny motes of dust that swirl in the sunlight. The oil smells of cinnamon and cedar wood, both imported luxuries. You dab it gently along the cheeks, then polish with the linen until the surface gleams like a polished gem. As you work, a chant begins behind you, soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Another priest has entered the chamber, joining you in silent reverence. You don't speak. You don't need to. This moment is about presence, not conversation. Mainstream historical records tell us Egyptian priests performed these rituals daily. Statues were awakened each morning, washed, dressed in miniature garments, and even offered food, though most of that, unsurprisingly, went to the priests afterward. The gods, it seems, had a habit of not finishing their plate, which conveniently worked out for everyone involved. A quirky side note. In some temples, the statues had hidden compartments, little secret doors at the base or behind the robes. Scholars still debate whether these were symbolic spaces for offerings or far more fun to imagine miniature dressing rooms for divine costume changes. You press your forehead briefly to the cool floor in front of the statue. It's not required every time, but you like the way it anchors you physically and mentally. It's hard to feel distracted when your nose is inches from sacred dust. And then you rise, gathering your tray once more, and step backward carefully from the sanctuary. Never turn your back on the gods you were told. It's bad form. Also, it gives the statue time to blink when you're not looking. Okay, maybe that last part's just your brain playing tricks. The temple's side corridor opens into the scribe's chamber, a long, airy room lined with baskets of papyrus scrolls and pots of ink thick enough to stain your soul. The head scribe, a stern man with the posture of a scorpion, glances up as you enter. You're here to retrieve the hymn scrolls for evening prayers. He waves you toward the archive shelf with a sigh that says, "I've been awake since the Old Kingdom." You duck past a stack of ledgers and locate the scrolls wrapped in linen crisp neat, probably older than your grandfather's grandfather. Each is inked in meticulous hieroglyphs with miniature illustrations in the margins, flowers, birds, one particularly cheerful crocodile who seems to be holding a harp. You like that one? He's got flair. Historians still argue whether priests memorized these hymns or read directly from the scrolls. Some claim the rituals were so ingrained the words practically sang themselves. Others point to the existence of so many carefully preserved scrolls and suggest even the most practiced priest had cheat sheets. You return to the central courtyard where a group of novice priests are practicing ceremonial steps, trying very hard not to trip over their own feet. It's like watching a sacred line dance performed by sleepy flamingos. One of them spots you and stiffens, nearly knocking over a tray of lotus petals. You nod solemnly, pass them the scrolls, and keep walking, resisting the urge to whisper, "Don't trip like a mischievous ghost." That's the thing about temple life. For all its dignity and grandeur, it's still full of people. People who sweat, sneeze, stumble, and occasionally forget which way to bow. As you pass the central pool, a group of children, perhaps relatives of the temple staff, are chasing each other around the edge, laughing so hard they almost fall in. A matronly priestess herds them away with the practiced fury of someone who once had 4 toddlers and now has 0 patience. You can't help but smile. Even here in the most sacred spaces, life finds its way in. Back in the antechamber, your fellow priest hands you a cup of cool barley drink. It tastes vaguely like sour bread, but feels glorious on your dry throat. You sit side by side on a low bench, both of you too tired to talk. The temple bell chimes softly above just once, marking the hour. You tilt your head back and stare up at the ceiling where faded stars are painted across the plaster in neat constellations. No one has repainted them in years, but they still glow faintly in the dim light, holding the sky in place above your busy, buzzing world. It's not glamorous, this life. You don't ride chariots or lead armies. You don't build pyramids or command sandstorms. But you do something just as strange, just as powerful. You help hold the order of the universe together, one shaved cheek, one polished god, one chant at a time. And for now, at least that's enough. You return to your chambers with the scroll of hymns in hand and about 10 minutes left before your next assigned task. That's practically a vacation in priest time. You sit cross-legged on a reed mat, adjusting your robe so it doesn't bunch behind your knees, and unroll the scroll just a little. The script dances across the papyrus neat black glyphs of bird's eyes and stylized arms curved in prayer. Some priests can sing these lines from memory pitch perfect breath control, trained like flautists. You meanwhile are still working on not saying the word for eternity like you're choking on sand. Outside your narrow window, the heat buzzes quietly. It's that late afternoon shimmer where time seems to blur a little. The priests have thinned out in the corridors, off prepping for dusk rituals or sneaking into the shade for a nap they'll definitely deny later. You, on the other hand, are trying to focus on the cadence of a hymn dedicated to Ta, master of craftsmen. It's basically a poem of praise for divine blueprints. Lots of perfect shape, pure form, and divinely measured elbow joints. Then from the doorway comes a scratchy throat-clearing sound. You glance up. It's the head purification priest. He has the slightly hunched bearing of a man who's been shaving himself and others since before you were born. He raises an eyebrow and gestures with his thumb. You groan. It's time for the real work, the nightly full-body purification scrub shave scent, and all. This one's no quick splash at a basin. You head out into the inner court where the purification pool gleams faintly under the softening sky. The water looks peaceful enough until you remember that it's cold. Always cold. They say that's on purpose to shock the impurity out of you. You're not sure if it works, but it definitely shocks something. You disrobe modestly, step into the pool, one careful foot at a time, and lower yourself into the water with the dramatic groan of someone twice your age. Goosebumps race across your arms. You take the linen cloth and start your slow, systematic scrub. Mainstream texts are pretty clear priests of high rank had to be physically spotless. Not metaphorically, literally. Cleansed, shaven, fresh-scented, and fully focused. Not just daily, but multiple times a day. The goal wasn't just outward appearance, though that helped. It was about tuning the body to divine frequency. You don't go into a sacred space dragging worldly filth with you, not even the invisible kind. You rinse your arms, your legs, your scalp still smooth from earlier, but getting a touch of prickly rebellion. Then comes the full reshave. Your fingers are wrinkled, your nose is dripping from the chill, and your razor slips once, grazing your shin. You hiss quietly, and the temple cat Tefan again meows like she's mocking your technique. There's a faint rustle of movement nearby. You glance up and see two younger acolytes waiting their turn at the pool. They look nervous. This is probably their first full ritual cleanse. You remember yours. You tried so hard not to shiver that you nearly passed out. One of the boys is hugging a jar of scented resin like it might defend him from the cold. Poor kid. Fringe practices. In some temples, purification wasn't just about bathing. It included swallowing small pebbles soaked in herb-infused water to scrub the spirit clean from the inside out. That fell out of fashion quickly, likely because it sounds miserable. You've heard rumors it might come back. You hope not. Historians still argue whether the priesthood's grooming rules applied equally across all temples. Some insist the 3 times a day shaving rule was reserved for those serving the main deities, Ra, Amun, Osiris. Others suggest it was more widespread, a kind of purity arms race between institutions. The cleaner you looked, the more trustworthy your god. Probably awkward for the crocodile cults. You step from the pool and dry off with a fresh flax cloth, the fibers rough but comforting. Your skin tingles not unpleasantly. Another priest hands you a clay jar of oil mixed with lotus and almond. You rub it over your arms, your neck, your scalp, everywhere the sun and the gods might notice. The scent is light floral and slightly powdery. It clings to you in a way that feels oddly grounding. Dressed again in crisp linen, you return to your cell for a final moment of stillness before dusk. The air is cooling now. You press your palm to the stone wall and feel it holding the last warmth of day. There's something peaceful about that, like the temple itself is a kind of slow-burning sun, absorbing and radiating in rhythm with the world outside. Someone passes by your doorway humming a hymn you've almost learned. The melody coils into the room like smoke. You hum back just one note barely audible. It's a quiet shared joke. You'll learn the words eventually, or at least enough to not be corrected mid-chant. Again. Dinner is a silent affair, not because of rules, but because everyone's too tired to talk. You sit cross-legged in the hall with a small bowl of lentils, a triangle of flatbread, and a few slices of dried fig. It's not glamorous, but it fills you. And your body, sore and scrubbed and scented, seems to thank you for the offering. You look around at the others, most of them older than you, some younger. All of you shaven, smooth, robed in white, glowing faintly in the lamplight like ghosts who've just finished doing laundry. It's an odd kind of family one that doesn't laugh much but somehow still feels warm. The head priest lifts his cup in a quiet toast. No words, just a nod. You nod back. And just like that, it's time for evening service. You rise bowl in hand and follow the others into the torch-lit corridor. Your feet make soft sounds against the stone like whispers. The scent of incense grows stronger. The night has begun, and the temple stirs in new rhythms. The third shave of the day is done. But the night still has more stories to tell. The temple at dusk is a different creature than the temple at dawn, where morning feels like a gentle awakening, sunlight slipping across smooth stone, and the low murmur of prayers whispered behind sleepy yawns. Nightfall brings shadows that stretch and deepen, a kind of sacred hush settling into every crevice. The air is cooler now, heavy with incense and intention. Everything smells of myrrh and the faint earthy undertone of old rituals. You move with the others into the main sanctuary where golden light flickers from open flame and polished bronze mirrors bounce it playfully across the walls. The statues loom taller here in the dark, not menacing exactly, but watchful, as if they've been waiting all day for this moment. Maybe they have. Tonight's hymn is for Osiris, god of the afterlife, agriculture, and general dramatic flair. You gather in a crescent near the offering table, each of you holding a votive lamp. The flames flutter like nervous moths, casting your own long shadows up onto the columns. You try not to look at your own. It always seems just a little too tall, too stretched, as if your shadow self has been skipping meals. The chant begins. Your voice joins the others automatically, still shaky on the more nasal vowels, but passable. You sway slightly in rhythm, not from intent, but because standing still for too long in this robe always makes your knees protest. The priest leading the chant holds up the scroll. His fingers are long, pale, slightly ink-stained. You realize you've never actually heard him speak outside of ritual. You wonder if he has a regular voice, one that's less divine authority and more please pass the lentils. Mainstream scholars agree Osiris worship dominated temple life for centuries. His myth of death, dismemberment, resurrection, and reigning as king of the underworld was a favorite both for its drama and its promise. Priests, particularly in Upper Egypt, performed these nightly rituals not just to honor Osiris, but to assist in his perpetual rebirth, like a divine Groundhog Day, but with more eyeliner. The offering table is now alight with gifts, bread shaped like scarabs, pomegranate seeds, arranged into neat circles, a small bowl of milk, a sprig of something that looks suspiciously like celery. You place your own item, 3 dates wrinkled and sticky, and whisper a blessing under your breath. You don't know if anyone hears it, but that's never the point. The head priest steps forward for the anointing. He dips a carved spoon into a tiny alabaster jar of oil and anoints the statue's forehead, shoulders, and knees. Then he anoints the offering table, the scroll, the ground beneath your feet. You're all being folded into the ritual like raisins into a very solemn cake. Fringe detail. In some temples, the high priest would take on the literal role of Osiris during ceremonies, donning elaborate masks, heavy beadwork, and sometimes lying inside a carved wooden sarcophagus, while other priests reenacted his resurrection. It was equal parts religious experience and mildly terrifying dinner theater. Historians still argue whether these performances were viewed by the public or kept secret within priestly ranks. Some believe they were community spectacles meant to reinforce cosmic order. Others insist they were private acts of divine maintenance too sacred for lay eyes. You're inclined to believe both depending on how much the temple needed donations that week. The ceremony ends with a brief moment of collective silence, each priest lowering their head as if to listen for the gods breathing. You hear only the crackle of oil lamps and the low whistle of a breeze threading through the columns. But for a second, you feel something else too. A tension in the air like a string pulled taut, then released. You extinguish your lamp in the bronze bowl near the exit, the smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. You watch it drift for a moment before turning to leave. Outside, the stars are waking. The courtyard is now bathed in silver and blue, the sandstone glowing gently like it remembers the sun. You walk along the portico, your footsteps quiet soft. Your duties are done for the day, but sleep doesn't come easy in a temple. Too many thoughts, too many echoes. So instead, you do what most priests do. When they're too restless for bed, you find something to scrub. The basin room is quiet, empty. You find a cloth and start cleaning the copper bowls. It's not required, not even on your rotation. But there's comfort in it. The repetitive motion, the faint squeak of cloth on metal, the way you can watch tarnish give way to shine like peeling time backwards. One bowl has a faint engraving, an ibis-stylized 1 foot raised like it's about to sass someone. It reminds you of Thoth, the god of writing and knowledge. And sass. Probably. You run your cloth around its beak, polishing it to a mirror-bright gleam. For a second, your own face stares back wide-eyed, smooth-cheeked, slightly smudged with fig sap. You keep scrubbing. One bowl, then another. Time stretches. There's a reason this temple needs so many bowls. Ritual washing, offerings, anointing, mixing perfumes, containing flames, symbolism layered on function like an ancient IKEA catalog written in glyphs. Eventually, your hands start to cramp. You place the last bowl down gently and rinse your fingers in a side basin. The water is cool, again, refreshing, but this time you don't mind. You step out into the open air once more, blinking at the clarity of the stars above. No clouds tonight. Just that enormous bowl of ink-slick sky spangled with light. The Milky Way glows faintly stretched like linen across the heavens. You lean against a column and breathe slowly, letting the quiet sink in. The scent of incense still clings to your robe. Your skin is taut with cleanliness. Your scalp tingles faintly from the triple shaving. And somehow all of it feels right. This life is strange, controlled, repetitive. But in its repetition, you find rhythm. In its quiet, you find meaning. You don't know if the gods truly notice each offering, each chant, each swirl of oil on bronze. But you do. And maybe that's the point. A cat brushes against your ankle. Tefn again. Of course. She looks up, flicks her tail, and disappears into the darkness, like a blessing that refuses to stay put. You stretch once, then make your way toward your quarters. The stars above you blink. You imagine them as the eyes of old gods, watching, winking, waiting. You close the door softly behind you and let the night settle in. The next morning, you're woken not by the sun, but by the sound of someone sneezing aggressively into a linen cloth. You blink awake in the half-light head, still full of smoke and oil from the night before, and wonder briefly if sneezing is now part of the sacred daily rituals. Spoiler, it's not. It's just Chut, the junior scribe, whose allergies appear to be triggered by existence. He offers you a sheepish look over his pile of papyrus scrolls, and then promptly sneezes again, sending a cloud of temple dust wafting your way. So much for a peaceful morning. You dress, wash, and rejoin the living flow of temple duties. This morning you're on scroll maintenance, which sounds important, but mostly involves chasing beetles out of storage baskets and smoothing out crinkled corners like an ancient librarian with a lint roller. The temple's archive is impressive rows of papyrus rolls stored upright in woven cubbies, their ends sealed with beeswax labeled in ink that has long since faded to the same color as overbrewed tea. It's your job to open one scroll at a time, check for rot, gently brush away dust with a feather and re-roll it, slowly, carefully, like the scroll might explode if you're too enthusiastic, because some of them might. Mainstream historical fact. The ancient Egyptians were obsessive about record-keeping. From grain tallies and labor rosters to star charts and hymns to hippo birth predictions. Yes, really, scribes chronicled everything. Temples like this one weren't just houses of gods, they were administrative hubs, libraries, hospitals, and schools all rolled into one, with a better selection of reed pens. Today's scrolls seem to be mostly offering tallies lists of items donated to the temple by nobles, merchants, or extremely guilty commoners. You read through an entry about a man who gave 12 baskets of figs and a gold amulet shaped like a cobra. No reason stated, just a vaguely ominous line at the end. For the health of his household and the favor of the gods. You'd bet your best shaving razor he cheated on his taxes. As you're re-rolling a scroll about barley distributions, you spot a name scribbled in the margins, Maconet scribe of dubious handwriting. You can't help but grin. Temple life may be strict, but that doesn't stop scribes from passive-aggressively insulting each other through the ages. You reach for the next scroll and freeze. It's damp, just slightly. Not soaked, not warped, but enough to raise every alarm bell in your body. Moisture in the archives is a disaster. Like burn the temple down and start over level bad. You gently unroll the top edge and find, of course, a mildew spot. Just a tiny one, dark and fuzzy like a particularly disrespectful mole. You summon a conservator priest who clucks and sighs and then breaks out the emergency toolkit, a bone spatula, a bundle of myrrh twigs, and a look of weary judgment. Fringe tidbit. Some temples reportedly used cats, not only to keep mice away from papyrus, but also to serve as early mildew detectors. Supposedly, certain feline breeds would refuse to sit near compromised scrolls. Historians still argue whether this was intentional training divine instinct or just typical cat snobbery. As repairs begin, you're sent off to the antechamber to prepare scroll offerings. That's right, offerings to the gods in scroll form, not just food and perfume. Words matter too. Especially the pretty ones. You pick out a hymn to Hathor, goddess of love music, and cow-themed jewelry. It's been written in 3 inks black for the body, red for key phrases, and gold for her name. Your task is to brush over the faded gold with a new layer using a fine stylus dipped in shell gold paste. One wrong move, and you'll turn Lady of Joy into Lady of Jam. So you go slow, very slow. You breathe with the strokes steady and even. Each letter gleams to life under your hand like it's just woken from a nap. The scroll shimmers by the time you finish its words, alive again. You carry it into the small chapel beside the sanctuary where Hathor's statue sits adorned in beads and lotus garlands. Her face is serene, almost smiling, like she just heard a particularly juicy temple rumor. You bow low, place the scroll gently before her, and whisper a blessing. You don't even know if it's the right one, but it feels right. The rest of your morning passes in odd errands. You deliver herbs to the kitchen, return sandals to the bathhouse, and help a very confused acolyte decipher whether donkey butter is a metaphor or a real recipe. Spoiler, it's real. And yes, it smells exactly like you'd think. You get a short break before lunch, and you spend it sitting on a low bench in the sun, letting your robe dry from an earlier splash of ceremonial water. A small bird hops close and pecks at your sandal. You stare at it. It stares back. You both silently agree to pretend the moment never happened. By midday, you're back in the purification chamber, the noon shave. Round 2 of 3. The barber priest doesn't even say hello anymore, just waves you in and sharpens his blade like he's got opinions about your eyebrows. As the blade glides across your scalp again, you find your mind drifting. Why all this shaving? Why this obsession with smoothness, with eliminating hair like it's a personal insult to the gods? Mainstream belief held that bodily hair was impure, a sign of the wild, the uncontrolled, the mortal. Clean-shaven skin symbolized ritual purity, self-discipline, and divine alignment. You weren't just preparing your body for the gods. You were trying to make your body a mirror of theirs. Historians still argue whether this strict grooming extended to all classes of priests or just the high-ranking inner sanctum crew. Some evidence suggests outer temple staff got away with less frequent shaves. Lucky them. Your scalp itches just thinking about it. Lunch is served in the shade of the fig tree court. Bread, onions, lentils, and a dab of honey for dessert. You eat slowly seated among the other priests, the mood casual for once. Someone cracks a joke about yesterday's goat escape, and someone else offers a very inaccurate impression of the goat's bleeding. You laugh. Everyone does. Even the head priest. For a moment, the weight of robes and scrolls and shaving razors lifts, and you're just a group of people sitting in the sun sharing food and stories. A breeze stirs the leaves above you. The temple walls glow gold and ochre in the light. Somewhere a hawk cries. And beneath all of it, the Nile whispers its eternal song, steady, patient, a lullaby written in water. The wind carries the scent of crushed mint leaves and warm stone as you rise from lunch and brush crumbs from your robe. There's no time for indulgence, afternoon duties await, and the temple as ever moves on its own clock. A gong echoes through the air like the sound of a very polite thunderclap, signaling the second round of ceremonial cleanings. Your first stop is the anointing room. Their bowls of scented oil gleam like melted amber beneath narrow slits of sunlight. You're handed a shallow dish filled with a blend meant for ritual foot washing myrrh, cedar, and lotus root steeped in olive oil. The aroma is rich and earthy, the kind of smell that makes you feel like something ancient just looked directly into your soul and nodded solemnly. You kneel before one of the senior priests. He's older, with laugh lines buried beneath layers of formality, and begin the careful process of bathing his feet. It's humbling, of course, and also strangely soothing. You focus on the warm water, the texture of the cloth, the rhythmic motion of washing. There's a quiet dignity to the moment, until he sneezes. And naturally he blames the scented oil. You both pretend nothing happened. Dignity is fragile like that. You move next to a line of novices who have just finished their own midday shaving. Their scalps gleam under the sun like polished alabaster. They look like a row of freshly peeled fruit. You try not to laugh. One of them mutters about itching in places that shouldn't itch, and you give him a look that says, "Welcome to the life, kid." Mainstream historical fact. Priests in ancient Egypt didn't just shave their heads. They removed every strand of hair from their bodies 3 times a day if they served in the inner sanctums. Eyebrows, eyelashes, even armpit hair gone. All of it. Cleanliness wasn't just godliness, it was basically a legal requirement. A single stray nose hair could get you removed from a sacred duty. You're sent to help with incense preparation next. The room smells like someone tried to make a cake out of moss and summer air. Jars and sacks of crushed herbs line the walls, frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, juniper berries, and some questionable powder labeled soothing, unknown, but 3. You mix a paste with water and honey, kneading it slowly into soft pyramids that will harden over the next few days. One of the jars nearby contains resin that looks suspiciously like dried beetle wings. You pretend not to notice. Some questions are best left unanswered. Fringe tidbit. In some rituals, the incense wasn't burned, but chewed. Yes, chewed. There are scattered records suggesting that certain priests would hold small incense pellets under their tongues to purify their breath before speaking sacred words. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic hygienic or just really committed breath freshening. With the incense now drying in trays like rows of sugary cookies, do not eat them, you're reassigned to escort duties. A visiting noblewoman has arrived with an offering 2 baskets of pomegranates and a questionably tame baboon. The baboon glares at you. You glare back. A mutual understanding is reached. You guide her through the open portico, reciting the proper invocations in a voice that's trying not to crack. The baboon picks at its toes. She smiles at the statues and nods appreciatively at the murals, as if she understands every hieroglyph. She definitely doesn't, but it's rude to mention. You stop in front of a relief showing a winged ma'at balancing a feather on a scale. She calls it charming. You decide not to explain that it's the literal weighing of the soul after death. The noblewoman departs with her baboon, who attempts one last intimidation stare as he's led away, and you exhale like you've been holding your breath since sunrise. The final ceremony of the day approaches the sun's resting. It sounds dramatic, but really it's a graceful winding down of the temple's rhythm, an acknowledgement of Ra's descent into the underworld and the sacred transition to night. You carry a tray of polished alabaster cups into the hypostyle hall, where flickering torchlight dances across rows of massive columns painted in lotus blues and papyrus greens. The ceiling is high, and dark stars painted across its surface in gold leaf, like the night sky snuck indoors to eavesdrop on the prayers. The head priest recites a long hymn in a voice that could put stone to sleep. You half follow mouthing along with the familiar phrases about rebirth, eternal light, and the renewal of cosmic order. There's a line about Ra's solar boat sailing through the rivers of the night, and you picture it fiery and majestic, crewed by beetles and lions and gods with heads like birds. Someone behind you coughs, probably chewed again. You all shift slightly, robes rustling like a forest of linen trees. Mainstream historical belief held that Ra's journey through the underworld each night was crucial to the survival of the world. He had to defeat chaos battle serpents and pass through 12 gates of darkness before being reborn at dawn. The priest's evening rituals weren't just symbolic, they were seen as helping power that journey. As the last verse is sung and the final incense stick burns out in its holder, you file out into the open air once more. The sky above is bleeding red, and violet stars just beginning to blink into view like shy onlookers. You're exhausted. Not from labor, though there's been plenty of that, but from the sheer intensity of constant reverence. The rituals never stop. The purification never ends. Every breath, every blink is regulated by expectations carved into stone and tradition. You return to the washroom one last time for your third shave. This one's quick, mostly touch-ups. The blade skims over skin that's already been shaved so often, it started filing a complaint with the gods. Historians still debate whether the triple shaving rule was strictly followed by all priests, or whether it was an ideal more often spoken of than practiced. You suspect it depended on rank, and how grumpy the temple barber was feeling that day. The blade finishes its final pass across your chin. You dry off, dress in fresh linen, and finally step out into the evening air with nothing left to do. You sit by the sacred lake again, the same quiet spot as the night before. The water reflects the sky like a pool of moving obsidian stars breaking apart as ripples pass. You stretch every joint, sighing with relief. Your feet dangle just above the grass. Crickets chirp. A frog croaks, once then seems to regret it. Somewhere in the distance, a priest drops something ceramic. You hear a muffled curse and a splash. You smile to yourself. Tomorrow it starts again. The shaving, the scrolls, the hymns, the incense. But for now, for this one fleeting moment of stillness, you are clean. You are calm. You are free. You rise early the next morning to the faint hush of the wind through stone corridors and the subtle slap of sandals on flagstone. The sun hasn't quite lifted over the horizon yet, but the temple never sleeps. Somewhere in the distance, a gong taps once lightly, like it's being polite this time. You rub your eyes and stretch every muscle stiff with yesterday's repetition. Your robe, neatly folded beside your mat, still carries the faint scent of sandalwood and chalky limestone. You dress with slow hands, reluctant but practiced. The first shave is calling. You arrive in the wash chamber to find Chut already there, hunched over a basin and muttering something about how shaving a chin 3 times daily should qualify one for sainthood. You smile wordlessly and take your place beside him. The water is cool, the blade duller than yesterday. Your hand hesitates, then begins the slow, careful scrape across your cheek. Mainstream historical fact. The priests often used copper or bronze razors metal that dulled easily, especially after frequent use. Sharpening them was a daily task, though it never really brought the edge back to pleasant. Shaving was less a moment of luxury and more of a slow, deliberate argument with your own face. Jut nicks himself and hisses under his breath. You both pretend not to notice. Once your skin is smoothed and your chin sufficiently shiny, you prepare for the morning procession. The temple fills with that low, thunder-like hum of movement, bare feet against polished stone robes, brushing in unison, and the distant rhythm of a reed flute starting its sleepy spiral into melody. You line up with the others, shoulders squared eyes, forward each of you carrying something sacred, a scroll, a scepter, a small jar of ceremonial oil. Yours is an alabaster bowl filled with flower petals. Not symbolic, not metaphorical, just very literal petals. They're scattered across the threshold of the sanctuary as you pass a daily offering of beauty that feels both dramatic and slightly impractical. Still, you perform it with care. Even the gods appreciate a bit of flair. Inside the inner sanctum, the world changes. Sound fades, the light grows dim, and the air thickens like something whispered long ago still lingers in the corners. You've been in here dozens of times, and it still gets you. Every single time. The statue of the god towers above, serene and imposing, cloaked in gold leaf and shadow. Your fellow priests move with quiet reverence, adjusting offerings, reciting hymns under their breath. The head priest anoints the statue's lips and feet with oil, a practice that symbolizes nourishing the divine presence, keeping the god alive in the earthly realm. It's all very serious, very important, very sacred, and yet out of the corner of your eye you catch Jut trying not to sneeze again. His face contorts, his hand flails toward his nose, and then miraculously he stifles it. You both exchange the tiniest of glances, barely a flicker, but it's enough. A shared moment of humanity tucked inside centuries of ritual. Fringe tidbit. Some temples kept live animals as avatars of gods, sacred bulls, ibises, or crocodiles. These creatures were cared for like royalty, complete with grooming schedules and special diets. There are even records of crocodiles being adorned with jewelry and having their own priests. Historians still argue whether this was sincere divine reverence or a very elaborate ancient PR campaign. Your next assignment is not as glamorous record-keeping. You're sent to the scroll room, a shaded chamber lined with shelves groaning under papyrus documents, each carefully labeled with hand-carved tags. You're tasked with inventory noting which scrolls have been used, which need repair, and which have mysteriously disappeared again. You run your finger down a brittle record of grain offerings, sneezing at the cloud of dust it kicks up. These scrolls catalog everything from celestial alignments to tax lists, from healing rituals to how many fish were offered during the last flood season. You lose an hour without realizing it eyes, swimming through looping ink and smudged hieratic characters. There's a strange comfort in the repetition. The knowledge that someone thousands of years ago scribbled down the same complaints, tracked the same shortages, sighed at the same slightly too damp corner scrolls. You come across a curious entry, a recipe for something called Ra's breath. It involves coriander white wine, crushed limestone, and a chant you are absolutely certain is meant to be sung off-key. No explanation, no purpose, just there. A mystery in ink. You mark it with a reed and move on. Outside, the day grows warm and sluggish. You're pulled next into a blessing ceremony for newly installed wall paintings. Yes, that's a thing. Turns out even murals get holy approval. You stand alongside a handful of others, palms out, chanting softly, as a priest sprinkles perfumed water in delicate arcs across the vibrant pigments. The image is stunning, Isis offering protection to the pharaoh Horus, hovering with falcon wings, outstretched ankhs, and eyes of Ra spiraling across the background like cosmic wallpaper. One of the novices asks why the gods always seem to be in profile. You shrug. Because it's more flattering, you whisper, earning a snort. Mainstream artistic convention in ancient Egypt dictated rigid styles faces in profile torsos, facing forward feet stepping left. It wasn't about realism, it was about meaning. Symbol over form, order over accuracy. You spend the afternoon carrying offerings between altars. A bundle of dates here, a handful of bread loaves there. You pass one altar with the statue of Bastet, the cat-headed goddess of protection and domestic joy. Someone's left a small saucer of milk and a very real, very snoozing temple cat beside it. The cat does not move. The goddess is clearly appeased. By late afternoon, you return to the outer gardens to prepare the sacred fig tree for tomorrow's leaf-gathering ritual. Yes, it's as thrilling as it sounds. You clip dried leaves, brush the bark, and mutter small blessings under your breath. One of the elders sits nearby, humming to himself, plucking at a stringed instrument that's been out of tune since the Second Dynasty. Still, it adds a nice soundtrack to your chores. As the sun dips lower, the light turns amber. Shadows stretch. The temple slows. You pause beside a basin, wash your hands, and catch a glimpse of your own reflection. Tired eyes, smooth cheeks, ceremonial lines still faintly drawn in kohl from morning prayers. Historians still debate whether the rigid discipline of Egyptian priesthood was more about devotion or control. Was it a genuine pursuit of spiritual perfection, or a way to keep power, concentrated behavior, regulated the hierarchy intact? You don't have an answer. But as you walk back toward the sanctum, the scent of lotus oil drifting from your sleeves, you realize it doesn't really matter. You're a speck in a system older than memory, a single shaved, sandal-wearing speck. And for now, that's enough. The next morning arrives with that same warm haze clinging to the temple stones, as if the air itself is reluctant to start moving. You awaken with the stiffness of someone who has slept entirely too upright on a mat entirely too thin. Still, your body remembers the rhythm before your brain does robe. Sandals, rinse, scrape, and before you know it, the first shave of the day is behind you. You make your way to the storerooms, where today's assignment involves taking inventory of incense. It's not glamorous, but it's at least pleasantly fragrant. You're surrounded by shallow clay bowls and linen-wrapped bundles, frankincense, myrrh, cedarwood, kai-fi. One small jar is unlabeled, and when you open it, the smell hits you like a cherry at something between old soup and haunted library. You quickly reseal it. Some mysteries are best left unsolved. You count and catalog with meticulous care. Every offering has to be accounted for down to the last pinch of powder. The high priest is fond of recounting a time a junior scribe once forgot to log a shipment of cinnamon. The cinnamon incident, as it's now known, involved 2 full moons of temple bureaucracy and a very disappointed statue of Hathor. Mainstream historical fact. Egyptian temples were deeply organized, almost bureaucratic. They maintained vast storerooms and accounting systems, tracking every item used in offerings or rituals. Priests often acted as administrators, scribes, and even tax collectors for the temple's extended estates. It was holiness with paperwork. After incense, you're summoned to assist in a purification ritual at the temple's sacred pool. The water glitters under the morning sun, smooth as polished glass. The pool is shallow-edged with reeds and framed by carved stone steps. You and another priest lower buckets into the water, then pour them slowly over the edge of the temple threshold while chanting protective verses. The water smells faintly of lotus and stone. A dragonfly lands briefly on your wrist and then zips off like it has divine errands to run. The ritual is rhythmic, repetitive, and oddly soothing. You chant, you pour, you step back, then repeat. The novice beside you whispers that he heard a crocodile once climbed into the pool during a purification, bit the water ladle right out of someone's hand. You both glance nervously toward the reeds. Fringe tidbit. While many temple pools were carefully maintained, there are occasional inscriptions warning of river beasts or restless water spirits. Historians still argue whether these were metaphorical, spiritual, or just cranky swamp residents with teeth. Either way, the pool today remains undisturbed. For now. Your next stop is a statue dressing. The god in question, Ptah, the creator and craftsman deity, is currently being fitted with new robes and jewels. You help drape a saffron-dyed linen shawl across his broad golden shoulders. The fabric catches the light gleaming as if it remembers the sun from another life. You clean around the base of the statue with a feather brush. Every crevice, every inscription, every dust mote is treated like it might insult the divine if left unchecked. One of the senior priests insists on aligning Ptah's collar so precisely that he uses a plumb line and a measuring reed. You don't question it. Precision is part of the reverence. As the ritual concludes, incense is lit and the chamber fills with a soft haze. A priest hums a hymn beneath his breath, a tune you've heard 1,000 times but can't quite name. It always sounds like twilight. By midday, the temple is quieter. The crowds have gone, the outer courtyards lie in drowsy heat, and even the cats are napping in the shade like small, judgmental loaves of bread. You take a brief rest beneath a fig tree in the garden, drinking cool water from a ceramic cup shaped like a lotus. You lean your head back, watching the clouds crawl lazily across the sky, and for a moment you feel almost like a civilian. Almost. But then a bell clangs. Time for the second shave. You sigh deeply and return to the chamber where your blade, still slightly nicked from yesterday, awaits. You lather again, trying not to think about the tiny patch of stubble you missed this morning. The head priest is known to spot errant hairs from 30 paces. He calls them spiritual static. Mainstream historical fact. Cleanliness wasn't just hygiene, it was spiritual alignment. Hair was seen as impure, and regular shaving was considered essential to maintain ritual readiness. Priests had to be in a constant state of purification, as if the divine might knock unannounced. The second shave goes smoother than expected. Only one nick, no blood. You call that a win. Afterward, you assist with scroll maintenance, not copying this time, just checking for wear and damage. A crack here, a tear there. You carefully apply paste to a curled edge of papyrus and smooth it with the edge of a palm frond. As you work, you find a short poem tucked between two healing chants. It's not labeled, not signed, just a simple verse about the moon and the smell of desert sand after rain. Someone, centuries ago, paused in their work to write that. For no one. For everyone. You reread it twice before sliding it back. Later, you're called to bless a newborn goat. Yes, a goat. A local farmer has brought it as an offering, and before it can be properly given to the temple, it must be ritually welcomed. You place your hands lightly on its fuzzy head, whisper a short invocation, and try not to laugh as it bleats loudly into your face. The farmer beams. You nod solemnly. The goat tries to eat your robe. You chalk it up to a successful blessing. As the afternoon edges toward evening, a gathering is held in the library courtyard. Priests assemble to recite passages from the Book of the Dead, not the scary parts, but the philosophical ones. You sit cross-legged on woven mats listening as one priest reads in a slow sing-song voice about the journey of the soul and the weighing of the heart. A cat meanders through the group. No one stops it. The cat goes where it pleases. Someone near you dozes off, chin resting on their fist. No one stops that either. The wind picks up slightly, ruffling papyrus scrolls and robes alike. You find yourself oddly moved by the words despite having heard them before. Something about truth and balance and how the heart must not be heavy with wrongdoing. Historians still argue whether the Book of the Dead was meant to be memorized by all Egyptians or only read aloud by priests. Some versions were lavishly illustrated, others scrawled with basic ink and hope. Either way, the message remains steady: live well, die light. As the reading ends, the group disperses quietly. The sun dips behind the western wall of the temple, and the third shave of the day looms. You smile tiredly and walk toward the washroom once more, the scent of myrrh clinging to your sleeves, and the day's rituals trailing behind you like shadow. You return to the washing chamber under the rose-gold shimmer of dusk, the third and final shave of the day, calling you like an overly punctual ghost. The basin's water is still warm, still scented faintly with lotus and crushed mint. Your reflection flickers in the copper mirror-tired eyes, a smudge of ash at the hairline, and the ghost of a sunburn from too long in the garden. You soap the blade and begin again. This one's gentler, the pressure softer, not rushed, not sharp, like smoothing the creases from a day already lived. There's a certain poetry to it now, your hand knowing the motion before your mind catches up. You scrape away not just stubble, but hours. The strain behind your eyes, the goat breath, the fig tree pollen. All of it shaved off and swirled down the drain in soft suds. You dry your face with a linen cloth newly laundered, still warm from the sun. No one else is in the chamber. For the first time today, it's just you. The quiet and the echo of water drops, ticking like patient footsteps behind you. Mainstream historical fact. Shaving 3 times a day wasn't always about appearances. It was about purity. Rituals required priests to be in a constant state of spiritual cleanliness, free from the distractions and decay of the physical world. Hair, sweat, even dirt beneath the nails, each was believed to dull the connection between mortal and divine. You dress for the evening rites. Soft teal robe, a fresh sash knotted at the waist, and a thin golden amulet shaped like an ankh, warm against your chest. The colors glow gently in the lamplight, the fabric whispering against your skin with each step as you cross the temple toward the hall of offerings. Here the air is thick with incense. A dozen priests stand in silence around the altar, their faces illuminated by the flicker of oil lamps. You take your place in the circle. A hush settles. Then one by one you each speak a line of praise, your voices weaving together like threads in a tapestry. The words are old, worn smooth by centuries of repetition. You chant your part, voice steady. May the breath of Mayat fill this place. May order remain. And for a moment it feels true. You help distribute offerings afterward, small loaves of barley bread pomegranates, split into ruby red halves, clay jars of sweet beer. Everything placed precisely with reverent hands. Someone trips over a cat. It hisses, then continues licking its paw, like a deity that forgives but never forgets. Then comes the procession. The high priest, wearing a leopard skin sash and carrying the staff carved with tiny hieroglyphs, leads the group through the temple corridors. You follow in step feet, silent on the sandstone, the torchlight painting shifting murals on the wall. At one point, you pass a mural of Ra in his solar bark, rowing through the night sky stars scattered around him like seed pearls. You always like that one. Something about a god who has to work the night shift. The line pauses at the sacred chamber. Here the god's image sleeps behind a gilded curtain closed to all but the high priest. You bow your head as the curtain parts, releasing a wave of warmth and perfume. You do not look. That part of the mystery is not yours. You listen instead to the low murmur of invocation, to the flutter of fabric as offerings are laid inside, and to your own heart strangely calm. Historians still argue whether these inner sanctum rites were purely symbolic or believed to be direct communion with the gods. Some inscriptions describe literal conversations, gods speaking in dreams or visions. Others suggest it was the ritual itself that mattered, the repetition, the structure, the illusion of control in a world ruled by flood and famine. Afterward, the group disperses slowly, each priest returning to his own rhythm. You walk back through the courtyard beneath a sky now thick with stars. The wind has picked up slightly, and the temple's sacred palm trees rustle with papery elegance. You take a detour through the library on your way to the dormitory, not to read, just to pass through. The scent of old papyrus and polished cedar is oddly comforting. You trail a finger across the edge of a scroll case, catching the faintest bump of carved glyphs to know the names of the sky. You pause, then smile, too tired to know anything else tonight. On your sleeping mat, the linen feels cool against your skin. Your robe lies folded nearby. The walls are quiet. Someone hums softly in a neighboring room, just a lullaby, nothing liturgical. The melody drifts through the open window, mingling with the soft chirp of night insects and the distant rush of the Nile. Fringe tidbit. Some temples kept special dream rooms where priests or nobles would sleep in hopes of receiving divine messages through dreams. These rooms were often perfumed, darkened, and sometimes even lightly drugged with blue lotus or opium poppy. Scholars still debate whether the dreams were divine inspiration or carefully staged rituals to guide decisions. Either way, the gods seemed unusually chatty at bedtime. You drift off thinking about your morning, about goats and poems and 3 clean shaves, about chanting into the dark and offering figs to silence. You don't feel particularly holy, just steady, like a stone in the wall, like part of something older than your name. Outside, the moon rises slowly over the temple roof, casting silver light on the painted columns and echoing courtyards. Somewhere deep in the sanctuary, oil lamps still flicker. Somewhere closer, a cat sneezes. You smile into your pillow. It's been a long day. Again. Tomorrow you'll scrape your face until it gleams, dress a statue like royalty, and maybe wrestle another goat. Maybe not. Maybe it'll just be scrolls and incense and muttered jokes about the cinnamon incident. but whatever the duties, you'll do them. Not because they're glamorous, not even because they're sacred, but because you've grown to love this strange, shaved, silent rhythm of temple life. You return to the washing chamber under the rose-gold shimmer of dusk, the third and final shave of the day calling you like an overly punctual ghost. The basin's water is still warm, still scented faintly with lotus and crushed mint. Your reflection flickers in the copper mirror, tired eyes a smudge of ash at the hairline and the ghost of a sunburn from too long in the garden. You soap the blade and begin again. This one's gentler, the pressure softer, not rushed, not sharp, like smoothing the creases from a day already lived. There's a certain poetry to it now, your hand knowing the motion before your mind catches up. You scrape away not just stubble, but hours, the strain behind your eyes, the goat breath, the fig tree pollen, all of it shaved off and swirled down the drain in soft suds. You dry your face with a linen cloth newly laundered, still warm from the sun. No one else is in the chamber. For the first time today, it's just you, the quiet, and the echo of water drops ticking like patient footsteps behind you. Mainstream historical fact. Shaving 3 times a day wasn't always about appearances. It was about purity. Rituals required priests to be in a constant state of spiritual cleanliness, free from the distractions and decay of the physical world. Hair sweat, even dirt beneath the nails, each was believed to dull the connection between mortal and divine. You dress for the evening rites, soft teal robe, a fresh sash knotted at the waist, and a thin golden amulet shaped like an ankh warm against your chest. The colors glow gently in the lamplight, the fabric whispering against your skin with each step as you cross the temple toward the Hall of Offerings. Here the air is thick with incense. A dozen priests stand in silence around the altar, their faces illuminated by the flicker of oil lamps. You take your place in the circle. A hush settles. Then, one by one, you each speak a line of praise, your voices weaving together like threads in a tapestry. The words are old, worn smooth by centuries of repetition. You chant your part voice steady. May the breath of Mayat fill this place. May order remain. And for a moment it feels true. You help distribute offerings afterward, small loaves of barley bread pomegranates split into ruby red halves, clay jars of sweet beer. Everything placed precisely with reverent hands. Someone trips over a cat. It hisses, then continues licking its paw like a deity that forgives but never forgets. Then comes the procession. The high priest, wearing a leopard skin sash and carrying a staff carved with tiny hieroglyphs, leads the group through the temple corridors. You follow in step feet, silent on the sandstone, the torchlight painting shifting murals on the wall. At one point, you pass a mural of Ra in his solar bark, rowing through the night sky stars scattered around him like seed pearls. You always liked that one. Something about a god who has to work the night shift. The line pauses at the sacred chamber. Here, the god's image sleeps behind a gilded curtain closed to all but the high priest. You bow your head as the curtain parts, releasing a wave of warmth and perfume. You do not look. That part of the mystery is not yours. You listen instead to the low murmur of invocation, to the flutter of fabric as offerings are laid inside, and to your own heart, strangely calm. Historians still argue whether these inner sanctum rites were purely symbolic or believed to be direct communion with the gods. Some inscriptions describe literal conversations, God speaking in dreams or visions. Others suggest it was the ritual itself that mattered, the repetition, the structure, the illusion of control in a world ruled by flood and famine. Afterward, the group disperses slowly, each priest returning to his own rhythm. You walk back through the courtyard beneath a sky now thick with stars. The wind has picked up slightly, and the temple's sacred palm trees rustle with papery elegance. You take a detour through the library on your way to the dormitory, not to read, just to pass through. The scent of old papyrus and polished cedar is oddly comforting. You trail a finger across the edge of a scroll case, catching the faintest bump of carved glyphs to know the names of the sky. You pause, then smile, too tired to know anything else tonight. On your sleeping mat, the linen feels cool against your skin. Your robe lies folded nearby. The walls are quiet. Someone hums softly in a neighboring room, just a lullaby, nothing liturgical. The melody drifts through the open window, mingling with the soft chirp of night insects and the distant rush of the Nile. Tidbit. Some temples kept special dream rooms where priests or nobles would sleep in hopes of receiving divine messages through dreams. These rooms were often perfumed, darkened, and sometimes even lightly drugged with blue lotus or opium poppy. Scholars still debate whether the dreams were divine inspiration or carefully staged rituals to guide decisions. Either way, the gods seemed unusually chatty at bedtime. You drift off thinking about your morning, about goats and poems and 3 clean shaves, about chanting into the dark and offering figs to silence. You don't feel particularly holy, just steady. Like a stone in the wall, like part of something older than your name. Outside, the moon rises slowly over the temple roof, casting silver light on the painted columns and echoing courtyards. Somewhere deep in the sanctuary, oil lamps still flicker. Somewhere closer, a cat sneezes. You smile into your pillow. It's been a long day. Again, tomorrow you'll scrape your face until it gleams. Dress a statue like royalty and maybe wrestle another goat. Maybe not. Maybe it'll just be scrolls and incense and muttered jokes about the cinnamon incident. But whatever the duties, you'll do them. Not because they're glamorous, not even because they're sacred, but because you've grown to love this strange, shaved, silent rhythm of temple life. You wake before dawn again as usual, stirred not by bells or voices, but by the breath of wind through the narrow window, cool, dry, full of quiet promise. The temple still sleeps, its walls wrapped in shadow and dreams. You stretch on your mat joints, creaking softly, and sit up to wash your face with water stored in a clay jar beside your sleeping space. No splash, no soap yet. Just the simple ritual of water meeting skin, clearing away the night's fog. The first task of the day is not shaving. It's lighting the fire. You pad barefoot into the early chamber, still dim and quiet, and kneel beside the hearth. The flint and steel wait for you, arranged neatly next to a handful of papyrus scraps and the dry twigs of the sycamore. Your fingers, stiff from sleep, strike again and again until the first orange spark blossoms in the kindling like a tiny sun. You shield it from the wind, coax it to grow. There's something deeply comforting about the first warmth of flame, the way it licks at the gloom and hums softly as if in thanks. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptian temples had designated fire keepers among the priesthood. Keeping a sacred flame lit was part of maintaining cosmic order or ma'at, just as much as chants or offerings. If the fire went out unexpectedly, it was often interpreted as a divine warning or worse, a lapse in devotion. So you take your fire seriously. The embers glow. The smell of singed papyrus and dry bark curls into the air. You sit near the hearth for a moment longer than necessary, letting the warmth seep into your hands, your face, your bones. Then with a sigh, you gather your shaving tools. Today's blade feels different in your grip, slightly nicked from yesterday's overzealous pass behind the jaw. You make a mental note to ask the sharpening priest for help later. Maybe offer him a date or two in exchange. You lather up slowly this morning, the rhythm now familiar. Dip, the brush swirl, the soap spread it across your cheeks like war paint, if war involved sacred geese and papyrus archives. As always, it begins at the sideburns and moves down the neck. One careful stroke at a time. You know this face, like the lines on a map now. Each little ridge and dip, each stubborn patch of regrowth that somehow returns with the vengeance of a minor god. Halfway through, someone enters behind you, stifling a yawn. You meet eyes in the copper mirror. It's Bakari, the priest, who manages the offering schedules. He nods. You both know the routine. No words are needed. Shave, dress, prepare. Fringe tidbit. Some Egyptian priests believed that hair wasn't just unclean, but an actual invitation for demons. In a few recovered scrolls, facial hair is equated with chaotic energy stuff that invites disorder, mischief, even disease. Shaving wasn't just hygienic, it was spiritual pest control. You finish your face and reach for the beeswax stick used for sealing small nicks. The smell is faintly sweet, earthy, like old honey. You dab it over your chin, then rinse your tools and dry your hands with a woven cloth. From there, it's back to the antechamber where your linen robe hangs on a wooden peg. The robe is soft, freshly washed, dyed with a hint of saffron, a color reserved for mid-level rituals, important, but not divine audience level. You pull it over your head, fingers adjusting the folds, the sash, the tilt of the shoulder seams, until everything hangs just so. You catch your reflection again before you leave. Not out of vanity, just curiosity, like checking the surface of the Nile before stepping in. The morning rituals begin with cleansing the statues. You walk quietly with your fellow priests through the long gallery, the sandstone walls cool to the touch and painted with scenes of gods, gifting tools, calendars, and what appears to be an overly dramatic breadbasket. You pass beneath these painted gods like guests, walking under chandeliers, humbled, slightly impressed, and trying not to sneeze on anything sacred. The shrine is already open when you arrive. The high priest nods to you. You approach the statue of Horus, falcon-headed and powerful, and begin the ritual cleaning. Not scrubbing, not polishing, this is gentler. Like bathing a child. You use cloths dipped in scented water drawn carefully along the limbs and crown. The statue's eyes are inlaid with obsidian and seem to follow you, not ominous exactly, just attentive, like it's keeping a mental list. You murmur the ancient lines as you clean. Bright be the vessel, empty be the mouth of lies. Let this place echo only truth. You do not know who wrote these words. Maybe no one alive does. But they fit in your mouth like pebbles, shaped by the river, strange at first, then suddenly smooth. Historians still argue whether these rites were truly believed to feed and wash the gods, or whether the statues were seen more as representations. Some think the gods inhabited the images temporarily. Others believe it was the attention, the care itself, that was the offering. You personally suspect the gods just liked the attention. You know you would. After the cleaning, there's the anointing, tiny drops of oil rubbed gently onto the feet of the statue, then a grain offering, then incense. It all flows like a kind of holy choreography. You don't always feel it, the presence. But today, you do. Just for a moment. Like something pauses to watch through your eyes. Later, as the sun rises fully and the courtyard floods with pale light, you help record the rites in the temple ledger. The scroll is long-lined in perfect columns and smells faintly of tamarisk. You write slowly, the reed brush gliding across the surface, each symbol etched with deliberate strokes. It's satisfying in its way, turning moments into memory, smoke into script. The last task before midday is purely practical, preparing the goat feed. You sigh. The goats again. They bleat in anticipation the moment you arrive, as if they've been watching the sundial. You measure out the barley crush, a few herbs toss, and some chopped fig leaves, and try to ignore the one goat that keeps attempting to eat your sash. You push him gently away. He stares at you. You stare back. He wins. Again. But you smile anyway, because he's part of it. The absurdity, the repetition, the odd peace of knowing what each hour asks of you. And tomorrow, well, you'll light the fire again, sharpen the blade, clean the god's sandals, and probably wrestle the goat. But tonight there's still more to do. The noon sun hits the temple like a symbol, bright, heavy, and impossible to ignore. You duck beneath an awning for a moment of shade, wiping your forehead with a strip of linen that now doubles as both towel and emotional support. The courtyard hums with layered noise, sandals, scuffing bees murmuring around the lotus planters, and distant chanting that's either a prayer or someone trying to remember what time lunch is. Lunch, by the way, is never thrilling. Today's version arrives in a simple clay bowl, barley stew, with onion and chickpea cooled just slightly by the breeze, and your own hopeful optimism. You eat quietly with two other priests sitting cross-legged near the herb garden, sharing bites of pickled radish and discussing whether the stars seem closer during the flood season. They don't, but it's nice to pretend. Mainstream historical fact: ancient Egyptian priests followed surprisingly structured diets, especially when actively serving in temples. Meat was often avoided. Onions were debated, and wine. Well, wine was sometimes considered sacred and sometimes considered dangerous, depending on which god you were currently trying to impress. Consistency was not the strong suit of divine preferences. You finish your lunch with a fig, sticky and sweet. You savor it slowly, knowing the next few hours will demand focus. It's scroll transcription day. Back in the scriptorium, where the sunlight filters through latticed stone, you settle into your assigned corner. A table, slightly uneven. A chair, also slightly uneven. A reed brush and black ink made from soot and resin. Your scroll, a half-finished passage on celestial omens and how to interpret the moon's sneezes. That's not a joke. The passage literally translates as "when the moon breathes irregularly, harvest cautiously." You smile to yourself and get to work. Each hieroglyph takes time, your hand forming the curved owl, the stoic seated man, the reed, and the ripple. You enter a kind of trance where the lines aren't just symbols, but a quiet song of knowledge. Each mark hums with memory. Every dot is a held breath. Every curve a whisper. Somewhere to your right, someone sneezes. You pause ink mid-drop and glance over. It's Bakari again, the offering priest. He grins and mouths moon's breathing weird. You roll your eyes and return to your line, though the corner of your mouth betrays you with a smile. Fringe tidbit. Among some temple staff, there was a belief that every scroll had a guardian spirit, a kind of papyrus ghost, who would get offended if you copied sloppily or spilled ink too freely. One poorly kept myth involved a priest whose brush accidentally marked a god's name with a cracked symbol. The next morning, all his sandals had vanished. All of them. Replaced with left-footed goat shoes. Coincidence, maybe. Goat-related divine punishment. Possibly. You finish your passage and lay the scroll gently on the drying rack. The room smells of ink and dust and papyrus glue, a scent you've come to associate with quiet importance. You stretch your arms overhead, feeling the tension ripple down your spine like water poured from a jar. Next comes the surprise inspection. Once every few days, a high-ranking official draped in robes so elaborate they may have their own zip code arrives to walk the halls and glare thoughtfully at everything. Today's version is surprisingly prompt. You hear the footsteps before you see the man sandaled, purposeful, and far too rhythmic to be a friend. You quickly straighten the offerings at the side altar and hide the half-eaten radish behind a scroll. Just in time. The official enters, peers around, and nods, in a way that clearly means I suspect all of you are up to something, but I won't prove it today. He leaves in silence. You exhale. Historians still argue whether these inspections were about maintaining temple quality or about reinforcing social hierarchies. Some suggest they were merely ceremonial. Others believe the officials were gathering subtle intelligence, temple politics being nearly as tangled as royal court gossip. Either way, everyone tenses up when the fancy sandals show up. As the afternoon deepens, the temple cools. Shadows stretch along the columns like lazy cats. You find yourself back at the main entrance, watching the play of light and dust motes. Your final chore before evening, polishing the alabaster floor tiles with a cloth dipped in lemon-scented water. It's not glamorous, but it is calming. You scrub in slow circular patterns, the stone gleaming beneath your hand. The temple doesn't ask for grand gestures. It asks for care. Repetition. Small acts of devotion stacked like bricks. You pause to look at your reflection in the polished stone. Not much hair left. No surprise there. The day's third shave came and went after the inspection, quick and precise, like flicking crumbs off a sacred tablecloth. You check your face again, not out of vanity, but habit. Still clean. Still priestly. As twilight creeps in, a young novice approaches. She holds out a basket of lotus petals and asks you to help scatter them in the central shrine for tonight's offering. You take the basket with a nod, the scent of the blossoms rising like perfume from memory. Together you walk the inner halls in silence, dropping petals as you go. The petals make no sound when they fall. They drift soft and slow, resting on the floor like gentle punctuation. A reminder that even the gods appreciate nice flooring. The shrine glows with lamplight, and as you near the altar, you catch a glimpse of something unexpected. A cat perched beside the statue of Bastet Tail, curling like a question mark. The cat blinks at you. You blink back. She doesn't move. You nod in respect. She turns away as if to say, "About time." Mainstream historical fact. Cats were not only tolerated in temples, they were revered. Some temples even had cat guardians with special collars and ceremonial names. Killing one, even accidentally, was a criminal offense. You once heard a rumor that a priest lost his job for sneezing on a cat. probably apocryphal. But then again, so was Claude the lucky cabbage. The final petals are scattered. The lamps flicker, and the night begins. You step outside for a breath of air, watching the stars gather like shy musicians tuning their instruments. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, someone is playing a flute, slow, low, mournful. You listen, and you think about tomorrow and the day after that, not with dread, but with a kind of gentle predictability, like watching the Nile rise or waiting for the sun to color the stone golden again. Your fingers still smell faintly of lotus. Your feet are sore, but your face is smooth, and your heart oddly feels still. You don't remember falling asleep exactly, just that you blinked once beneath the stars, leaned back against a cool stone pillar, and now here you are again, roused by a bell that's not quite urgent, but not entirely casual either. It's the twilight bell calling the evening attendants to begin the last sacred cycle of the day. You stretch slowly your joints, offering tiny protests, like old doors complaining politely. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls a sharp note in the hush. The temple at night is a different creature. It exhales. It hums low. The incense has changed, no longer sharp frankincense, but something floral and slightly smoky, like dried rose petals and burnt thyme. You trail behind the others through a corridor dimly lit by oil lamps, flickering like sleepy thoughts. Their golden light dances across painted walls, scenes of kings, making offerings gods with animal heads, receiving gifts, stars scattered like seeds along a painted ceiling. Tonight your duty is candle tending. You'll move silently from altar to altar, trimming the wicks with curved copper scissors and adding just enough oil to keep the flame steady. Not too high, not too low. You've done it a dozen times, maybe more, but it never gets boring. Something about watching light stay alive in such a dark place, it feels like you're feeding a small, sacred heartbeat. Mainstream historical fact, temples across Egypt maintained a constant flame in honor of various gods. These weren't just for ambiance, light was divine, symbolic of order in the face of chaos. A snuffed flame left unattended wasn't just embarrassing, it was ominous. Some temple schools even trained young novices to maintain flame height consistency across multiple rooms. Flame studies. You can't make this stuff up. Your copper scissors make a faint snip and a tiny spark leaps before settling. You move to the next flame. Across the shrine, you spot someone else performing their tasks, a priestess setting small bowls of milk and honey near a statue of Hathor. She's humming to herself. The sound is low and wordless. It somehow makes the shrine feel warmer. And then, just as you kneel to reach a stubborn wick, you hear something fall. It's a soft sound, but sharp enough to catch your attention. A tiny clay jar rolling across the floor. You glance toward it and spot a shadow moving where no shadow should. It's not threatening, just unexpected. You stand slowly. Your heart doesn't race, but it does tilt slightly. Then you see it a cat. Probably the same one from earlier. She gives you a look that clearly says, "Control your wick trimming tools," and pads away through a half-open door as if she owns every square inch of this temple. Which, honestly, she kinda does. You laugh under your breath and retrieve the jar. No harm done. Fringe tidbit. Some Egyptian temples designated certain animals, especially cats, ibises, and crocodiles, as divine manifestations of gods. These creatures were often pampered, guarded, even embalmed upon death. One cat mummy was buried with a tiny golden necklace and a scroll detailing its contributions to spiritual cleanliness. Scholars still debate whether it was a genuine spiritual honor or the result of one very persuasive cat. The flame behind you flickers, reminding you to stay present. You finish the final altar and return your tools to a storage nook carved into the wall, still warm from centuries of hands doing the same. Now comes the part you secretly enjoy the most: garden watch. The temple's sacred garden isn't large, but it's one of the few places where the air feels fully alive. Moonlight filters through the papyrus leaves, turning the pathways silver. You walk slowly, checking the lotus pond for fallen petals, making sure the myrrh trees are undisturbed. The frogs sing their raspy lullabies in the reeds, each one trying to outcroak the others in a sleepy competition that no one wins. And you sit, for just a moment, on the carved stone bench beside the pond. The water is still, almost mirrored. Your face in the reflection is blurry and soft, washed in moonlight and time. You look tired, but not unhappy. Your scalp glows faintly in the silver light, a quiet reminder of the day's third shave. You rub your hand over your smooth skin. It's like touching a ritual itself. Historians still argue whether the extreme grooming of Egyptian priests was purely for hygiene or also deeply psychological. Some posit it helped separate the priestly identity from the personal one. No hair, no ego, no vanity. Others think it was just a practical way to reduce lice. And a few believe it was simply tradition passed down so many generations, no one questioned it anymore. You don't have the answer, but you do know that shaving your head in the dark by oil lamp is harder than it sounds. You've tried. Once. Let's not revisit the chin incident. From the garden, you hear temple doors shift on their ancient hinges. Closing time. You rise and head back through the corridor, now nearly empty. The walls echo faintly with the footsteps of people already gone. At the dormitory quarters, you unroll your mat fluff, your very unimpressive pillow, and settle onto your side. The walls here are plain, but clean. The windows small, but moon-shaped. The air smells faintly of linen and old papyrus. You're not the only one settling in. All around you, soft rustling. A cough here. A whispered good night. One soft prayer floating like smoke through the room. You turn onto your back and stare up at the wooden ceiling, its beams etched with centuries of tiny graffiti names, symbols, maybe even prayers. You add none. You only breathe. Slowly. The day folds itself behind you like a scroll tied shut. And now, the silence arrives. Not empty silence. Full silence. The kind that wraps itself around you like warm linen. The kind that says, rest now. You've done enough. In the dark, you smile slightly. Not because anything amazing happened today, but because everything did. You shaved. You scribed. You watched a cat critique your posture. You polished floor tiles and lit sacred flames and scattered petals no one will ever see. And somehow, it all mattered. The stillness deepens. Sleep hovers just outside your reach like a feather circling above your pillow. But your mind drifts again, quietly, not anxiously through the motions of the day, then backward like sand slipping through your fingers. Back to your first days in the temple. You remember how strange it felt stepping into a place where time had a different rhythm, where even the lights seemed to slow down to listen. You were young then, nervous, unsure if you belonged. You didn't know where anything was, let alone how to fold your robes in the correct triple pleat or shave without nicking your ear. You remember the older priest who showed you around patient serious, but with a face that cracked like sun-baked clay when he laughed. He told you that the temple wasn't a building. It was a machine for turning attention into meaning. Even sweeping, he said, is a kind of prayer if done with care. Mainstream historical fact. New temple recruits in ancient Egypt went through years of training, language, ritual, astronomy, medicine, even dream interpretation. They weren't just caretakers of statues, they were walking encyclopedias of ritual precision. One priest reportedly memorized over 800 ritual hymns. You can barely remember where you put your sandals. You still carry some of those first lessons with you. Like the way he showed you how to hold your arms when addressing a deity, not stiff, not slouched, but open. Or how to roll a scroll from the left when storing it not the right. The gods don't care he'd wink, but the librarian will throw a fit. You think about him sometimes now. He's long gone, reunited with Osiris or the Nile, or just the warm dark of memory. But his voice sticks in your head during the quieter tasks, like when you're scrubbing a basin for the 5th time and wonder if anyone notices. He'd say, "They don't need to notice. The gods notice. And even if they don't, you do." That sticks with you. Tonight, as the moon rises higher and the torches outside the dormitory flicker lower, a faint breeze slips through the shutters. It smells of river mist and crushed papyrus. You pull the linen over your shoulders and let your eyes drift half closed. Just as you're about to slip under, there's a light tap at the doorway. You don't rise, but you tilt your head. One of the younger acolytes peers in round-eyed, barefooted, clearly caught in that awkward half-state of needing help, but not wanting to admit it. You motion him over gently. He whispers that he forgot to set the incense for the pre-dawn hour. His tone suggests this is a crime just shy of burning down the temple. You smile in the dark. You tell him it's fine. You've forgotten worse. You once wore your sandals backward for an entire morning ceremony. The gods didn't strike you down. Together you slip into the hallway, barefoot, quiet, 2 ghosts in linen. The corridor hums with sleeping breath, distant frogs, and the occasional creak of an old beam shifting in its sleep. You walk him through it, showing where the special mixture is stored. Not the everyday incense, but the early offering blend myrrh, juniper, and a pinch of something powdery that always makes you sneeze. You prepare a small dish together and set it on the altar's side plate. He bows too low, almost bangs his nose on the stone. You try not to laugh. It's sweet how much he cares. You remember that feeling, that need to get it all exactly right, like every gesture holds the universe in balance. Fringe tidbit. In some temples, young acolytes were chosen based on the purity of their voices for chanting. In others, lineage mattered more. Some families passed down priesthood like heirlooms. There's even one temple record that describes a priest's son being rejected because his handwriting was aggressively disappointing. Scholars still argue whether this was literal or some kind of ancient bureaucratic roast. The incense bowl glows faintly as the last coal settles into itself. The young priest thanks you twice and hurries back to his mat, already yawning. You linger a moment longer. The temple is so quiet now you can hear your own heartbeat echo in your ears. There's something about this silence not empty, but aware. Like the stone is listening. Like the air is filled with stories too old to speak aloud. You step outside for just a moment onto the temple's east-facing platform. The stars still rule the sky, but the blackness has softened slightly. The first whisper of pre-dawn is beginning to press against the horizon, just a hint of lavender, too shy to announce itself yet. You close your eyes and listen. Somewhere on the Nile, a boat creaks against its mooring. A bird stirs in its nest. A breeze lifts the hem of your robe, then falls again. This quiet border between night and day is perhaps your favorite hour. Not because of what happens, but because of what doesn't. It's the pause, the breath held between notes, the moment before anything begins. You exhale slowly and smile again. Just you. The stars in a small square of incense smoke curling skyward like a secret. Tomorrow you'll shave again. Of course you will. You'll scrub your floor, chant your verses, trim your wicks, and try not to trip over cats or novices or your own exhaustion. But that's tomorrow. For now, there's just this soft, sacred hush. And you in the middle of it, tired, yes, but exactly where you're meant to be. There's a stillness to dawn in Egypt that doesn't belong to any other hour. It's not just silence, it's reverence. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. You stand there a little longer on the cool stone platform, letting the moment settle over you like mist. No one's calling your name. No bells are ringing. The temple hasn't quite opened its eyes yet. And you haven't either, not fully. Eventually, though, duty calls. You step back inside, moving past pillars etched with the same prayers you've memorized, the same stories told in loops of lotus and sun discs. You return to your mat just long enough to rinse your face with water from a clay basin and dab at the corners of your eyes. You feel the softness of linen between your fingers, the faint tingle of coolness on your cheeks. Everything is ready. Almost. One more thing. You reach for the razor again. The third shave. Always the third shave. The face is fine. Arms, legs, still smooth. But the scalp. The gods are picky. And hair waits for no priest. So seated beside a flickering oil lamp, you take your time. You draw the bronze blade carefully across the curve of your head, watching the tiny hairs gather like dust on the cloth beside you. There's something deeply personal in this act. Sacred? Yes, but also human. Humbling. Like starting fresh again and again every few hours by your own hand. Mainstream historical fact. Egyptian priests were expected to maintain absolute physical cleanliness, shaving multiple times a day, bathing in sacred water, even wearing specific types of linen that were considered ritually pure. Their appearance was less about vanity and more about preserving a symbolic order, presenting themselves as vessels of divine clarity. Hair, to them, was chaos, and chaos had no place in a temple. You finish the last stroke, rinse, dry, look up, and what do you see? Not a mystic, not a holy figure glowing with cosmic energy. Just you, a bit tired, a bit lopsided maybe, but calm, centered. You tie your robe, triple pleat as always, and head out into the waking temple. The sun has started its climb. Through the eastern courtyard, its first rays stretch across the floor like lazy fingers. The columns glow gold for a moment, then soften to pale sand. You walk slowly past them, nodding to the few others already moving, each lost in their own morning rhythm. At the sanctuary, you wait outside while the high priest performs the sunrise invocation. You listen to the chant low, and slow each syllable curling around the stone like smoke. The language is older than the walls themselves. You can follow most of it, but a few phrases always elude you like half-remembered songs from your childhood. You catch yourself mouthing along anyway. Once the doors open, you enter and begin your roll for this hour, sweeping flower petals from the floor, placing tiny bowls of natron beside each statue, polishing the copper lampstands with a cloth that smells faintly of mint. The tasks are small, gentle, soothing even. Fringe tidbit. Some temples recorded dreams as part of their official activities. People would sleep near statues of healing gods hoping for divine messages. One priest reportedly received a dream about a pigeon with excellent advice, and followed it so closely he ended up building a shrine just for the bird. Historians still argue whether that shrine was ever used, or if it was just one man's peculiar bedtime logic given architectural form. The day rolls forward. At midday, you assist in a purification rite, dusting a large obsidian bowl with scented herbs, then pouring sacred water while another priest chants. It's warm now, the kind of heat that wraps around you like a damp scarf. Your robes cling just slightly, and you find yourself longing for the cool garden again. Later still, you write. You spend part of the afternoon copying hymns onto fresh scrolls, each character inked with deliberate care. It's quiet work, but mentally absorbing. The rhythm of the brush calms you. The papyrus fibers whisper under your fingers. Outside, someone laughs lightly, a rare sound in this part of the temple. You smile without looking up. Then it's time for your last rotation, preparing the evening offerings. You carry a tray of figs, bread, and wine into a side chamber where the light has already started to tilt orange. The statue of the god seems to glow from within, caught in that perfect window of dusk. You place each item with care. Nothing fancy, nothing showy, just attentive. You straighten the edge of the cloth beneath the tray. Step back. Bow. Breathe. The work is almost done. Night drapes itself slowly over the temple. Candles are lit again, their light less about vision now and more about ritual comfort. You check the altars one last time. Sweep the corridor floor. Offer a soft prayer at the shrine of Thoth for clarity and less ink smudging tomorrow. Then finally you return to your mat. The air is thick with sleep and candle wax. You lie back, arms folded over your chest, and let your breath slow. Your scalp is smooth beneath your fingers. Your muscles ache, but in the way that reminds you that you showed up for your life today. Not as a hero, not as a legend, just as someone who shaved their head 3 times and still managed to be kind. And now, as the last thoughts tumble gently into stillness, let them drift. Let it all fade, now. Let the marble floors grow soft in your mind, their coolness replaced by a feeling of floating. The oil lamps dim, flickering slower like they too are blinking into sleep. You breathe in. The air is quiet. You breathe out. The temple fades behind your closed eyes. Imagine the sound of distant water lapping against stone, gentle, rhythmic, like a lullaby in a language older than memory. The scent of myrrh lingers warm and earthy. You feel the weight of your linen robe soften the way fabric does when it carries the scent of sun and ritual. Your body settles. The room holds you like a cradle wall's steady ceiling, high stars blinking just beyond the window slats. You don't need to remember every task or name or chant. You don't even need to remember why you're here. You're safe. The gods are quiet tonight, watching from their high shelves with expressions carved into eternity. They require nothing from you now. Just this. Just rest. You feel the temple breathe with you slowly, deeply, as if the whole world has found its rhythm again. And maybe tomorrow you'll wake to another shave, another sunrise, another bowl of figs arranged just so. But not now. Now you sleep, not because you're exhausted, but because you've earned it. And in the hush between today and tomorrow, something ancient stirs and smiles. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. End of script. Sweet dreams.